everybody. 33 years in 31 days. Day 20. Well over halfway now, aren't we? Well over halfway. Day 20, looking at 2009. And if I keep banging this little table that this computer's on, it's going to be doing that all night. Good evening. Welcome along. Good to have you here. Do drop a comment in. Mercedes, good evening. Welcome along. Let me know that you're here and who you are. And we'll look at 2009. I had a shower tonight after I'd been out doing some cars today in pouring rain, sort of soaking wet, and then get the car into the dry while you do the inside bits. And then I did another one. And so I got home, had a shower, got clean, but I didn't brush my hair after I'd had a shower, so it's all... So you'll just have to take me as I am. Mags, good evening. Welcome along. Good to have you in here. Right, not a great deal for 2009. While I've been working today, I've been sort of thinking, what else can I talk about tonight? What else? 2009, and trying to think of things that happened, and I can't. Which is another good reason why I'm not writing a book. Because there'd be great gaping holes in everything that I said and what I can recall. I must admit, the more I talk about stuff, the more I remember things, which I suppose is fairly obvious, but not that many. Brave in Spirit, sorry, I don't know your name, but welcome. Good to have you in here too. So the thing that I'm going to look at tonight is just one topic, so it's not going to be a huge, long broadcast, but just one topic, and that's kids in custody. When I first joined the job, bringing a juvenile into custody was not an issue, was never an issue. If they'd done something, you'd exercise your power of arrest, done, in they came. The only difference was that they were never put into a cell. They went into what was called a detention room. And for all intents and purposes, the only difference between a cell and a detention room is the type of door on the outside. It's still a room with a bench, with a mattress and an odd window, but the door to a detention room was a big door that you pushed shut and locked with a key. Whereas a cell door has a hatch in it, and it also slams and locks as it slams shut. It's the only difference. Were they held in a room where they couldn't go anywhere else and they were on their own? Yeah, they were. And that is the same, that was the same in custody. But when we got to Middlewich, now let me think, make sure I get it right. A wing was 1 to 10. They were all cells. I think at Middlewich, in fact, I'm pretty confident at Middlewich, every single cell was a cell. There wasn't a detention room. So there must have been a change in the legislation or something somewhere that made that happen, because the juveniles went into cells. Anyway, over the years, bringing juveniles into custody has become more and more of an issue, and something that people have steered more and more away from, to the point now, as I was leaving custody when did I leave custody? 2014. I left custody in 2014, and around that time, they were getting to the point of saying, if it's a juvenile and it's 6, 7, 8 o'clock at night, don't even think about locking them up. Think about dealing with it in a different way, unless it was a really serious offence, but otherwise using your SOCAP grounds and doing something differently, because they just don't want them in custody. Always fraught with problems, because you've got to find an appropriate adult, and you've got to then think about the appropriate adult says, well, I want a solicitor, and the kid says, well, I don't, and you say, well, the kid's saying they don't want one, so they don't have to have one, and it's their choice, and you can advise them. But if they still say no, they're not having one, they say, well, I want one. You say, well, you can have advice from a solicitor if you like, on the telephone, but unless the kid actually requests one to come, we're not asking one to come. Very complex sometimes. But the thing that really brings it home to you in custody is the revolving door of kids that just keep coming in. They just keep coming into custody, getting processed, getting dealt with, kicked out or sent to court, released, off they go, back to care homes in a lot of circumstances. Not all circumstances, but a lot of circumstances. And you think, how can we? Someone say, well, you can't just say that kids in care are the ones that are likely to cause the problems and all the rest of it. And no, you're right, they're not. But kids in care have already had a very difficult start in life and are already facing an awful lot of problems and difficulties and issues. And are they more likely to go off the rails? I think they potentially are more likely to go off the rails. And if they're not sort of kept, I don't know, control of is probably the wrong way of saying it, but if they're not in the right place in their own mind, and if they're not in the right place where they're living, and they've not got a relationship with the staff there, and then they're tempted by something, and away they go. They end up with drugs and county lines these days, and so on. But it's not just kids in care. It is kids that come from family backgrounds that have the parents pulling their hair out, thinking, what are we going to do with our son? Because he's just consistently, he's common phrases, he's fell in with a bad crowd, and he's got himself involved with cannabis, and now he's out all hours of the night and coming home at 3 o'clock in the morning, and he's only 15 or 14 or whatever. And care homes that say, is that the police? Yeah, want to report so-and-so missing. Yeah, they walked out about half an hour ago and we can't go after them. So we'll have to report them missing. When do they normally come back? Oh, normally of their own accord, about 3 o'clock in the morning. There's certain lack of parental responsibility sometimes from the care homes and the like, where they seem to think that they can left shoulder all their parental responsibility when a kid has walked out of the care home onto the police. But that's another story. Anyway, kids in care. Lots of kids coming in. And it's disheartening sometimes when you see some kids coming in who've got real problems and really having, for want of a better word, a really shitty life. And yes, they've got involved in crime. Yes, they've got on, the wrong side of the law and all that kind of stuff. But do they want to be there? A lot of the time, no, they don't. But they see it as an outcome. And sometimes they're getting more attention, rightly or wrongly, from some people who are showing them that they're their family, and makes them feel wanted and makes them feel important, which is something they're not getting where they should be. So they're drawn into this stuff. And so there was one kid, and I'm not gonna what shall I, it was a girl, and I'll call her Joanne. Not a real name. We'll call her Joanne. And Joanne came into custody time and time again. Sometimes you could be on a set of 4 shifts. We used to do 12-hour shifts in custody, 2 12-hour days, 2 12-hour nights, 4 days off. You could come in on the first day and she'd be in custody going to court. You come in the second day, she's back in, she's in custody, she's going to court. You come in on nights, somebody's locked her up and brought her in. You come in on your second night, somebody's locked her up and brought her in again. Consistently, every day, every night, spending the night in custody, running away from the care home, being found in possession of drugs or committing offences or public order matters or assaulting police officers, and police officers finally say, you're missing from home, we need to take you home, Joanne, blah, 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 scrap fight, public order, punch the cops, locked up, in they come. And be coming in all the time. And this, Joanne would often be quite violent and aggressive with people. She'd spit, she'd fight, she'd pull hair, she'd throw cups of water out of the cell hatch at detention officers. She would try and harm herself occasionally, and we'd have to go in and take all her clothes and put her into safety suits and all these kind of things. And really quite a disturbed kid. And it was quite disheartening to see that she kept coming in and she kept coming in. There was one occasion where she was being released and she said, "I'm not going." And we said, "Well, there's no further action on this job. We're going to let you go, and the care workers are coming for you. I'm not going with them." We ended up with about 4 care workers coming in a car to collect her, and they physically had to manhandle her into a car and then sit on her pretty much to drive to where they were going, to the care facility where she was going to stay. What did she do? She legged it the first opportunity she got. How on earth, when you look back at it, and even at the time you look at it and you think, how on earth is that kid going to go, well, here's somewhere I want to go? Because they've sat on me in a car and held me in all sorts of grips and restraints in order to get me here, and then they think I'm going to stay. It's never going to happen. Anyway, Joanne kept coming in and kept coming in, and there was just no end to it. And occasionally in custody, you have really busy. It's an odd place because you can have 35 people in and not be really busy. And you can have 10 people in and be rushed off your feet. It all depends on the demand of the prisoners and the risks that they're presenting and how they're behaving and all the rest of it. But came in one night on nights, and there weren't very many in custody. But one of those that was in custody was Joanne, and she was in one of the cells down the wing, and there was nothing much happening. And she's in a camera cell. So the camera cell is recording everything that's going on in the cell. So there's some amount of security for a male officer going into a cell with a female juvenile on your own. There's some security to be able to do that, because the camera will record and evidence everything that happens and interacts, even the conversation. If I can remember rightly, I think they picked up, or did they? Can't remember now whether they picked up the microphones or whether it was just you could pick it up from down the wing. Anyway, so that night I went, was it a night shift? Yeah, it was a night shift. I went in and we sorted a few things out, and there was nothing much happening, and it was quiet, and I thought, you know what, I'm going to go down and have a chat. So I went down and I had a chat through the hatch and asked her if she was all right, and chatted away. And she seemed okay. So I opened the cell door, entered the cell. She sat on the bed in the corner, and I sat down on the floor. I sat down on the floor in the corner of the cell with her, and I said, "How many times have you been in here recently?" Doesn't. And she wouldn't really talk to me, but a bit monosyllabic. But eventually, she started to talk a little bit, started to open up a little bit more. And I looked and I said, I sort of looked around the cell like this, and I said, "How long is this going to go on for? Just keep coming back." And we had a conversation. I can't remember all the conversation. We had a conversation. And she was fine. And I said, "You know you're staying in, aren't you? You're going to go to court in the morning." She said, "Yeah." So I said, "Well, have you had anything to eat? Do you need a drink? Blah, blah, blah." Left her to it. Went back. Went off duty at 7 o'clock in the morning, and she'd have been picked up a short time later and gone off to court. When I came back in on earlies, which would have been 4 or 5 days later, there was one of the sergeants going off who said, "Oh, here," gave me a piece of paper. I said, "What's this?" He said, Joanne wanted you to have this piece of paper when she went to court on whatever morning it was, 2 or 3 days ago. Oh, right. Okay. Off they went. We did all the handover. We checked all the prisoners. We did everything that we had to do when we come in the morning. And then I reached the point, oh, I've got that piece of paper. I pulled it out of my pocket, unfolded a piece of paper. Thank you. Nothing else. Thank you. Now, the sergeant going off was sarcastic, saying, blah, blah, blah. She'll be in again in no time at all, and blah, 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 blah. And what have you. But just a sheet of paper. Thank you. Now, whether it was down to me, or whether it was nothing to do with me, or whether it was a combination of lots of other factors all coming together, who knows? Joanne never came into custody again. Ever. Gone. Finished. And about 6 months later, it clicked, and I thought, I haven't seen her. Where is she? What? In the cops, you start thinking, what's happened to them? Has there been an accident? Have they been locked up and been sent down somewhere? Are they in the Young Offenders Institute? What's that? So I thought, can't go searching the systems for it because it's not an appropriate search to find out what's happened just for curiosity. What can I do? I don't know. I'll ring the care home. Rang the care home. Oh, really? Well, don't quite know what's happened with Joanne, but the last time she was there, she came out, she went to court, and we picked her up from court and everything, and she turned a corner. She started behaving, she started doing her studies at school, started to pick her feet up, get herself straight. We've moved her on to another placement. She's somewhere else now with less kids and more care and better people and doing really well and amazing. Don't know what's happened to her. Don't know if it's anything to do with me or whether it's a combination of things. I've often said to people that sometimes if you're really close to the problem, you often can't resolve it, and it sometimes needs a significant other from somewhere that's completely disconnected from it that goes and just has that, just sows the seed. I don't know whether I did it or not, and I'm not blowing my own trumpet because I don't know whether I did. If she was sat next to me now, she could say, well, a load of old rubbish. Didn't do it for that. I was grateful for the chat and thank you and all the rest of it. But no, the reason that I went off and started sorting myself out was because of, something else. I don't know. But it gave me a very nice feeling to think that perhaps I'd played a small part in helping her see a different path. And she took it. She seemed to grab it with both hands and run, which was just an amazing thing, which was really nice. So that's all I'm going to talk about tonight. I'm just going to have a quick look at the comments. James Hibbert, other than travel time, let's see if I can put that up there. Yeah, see. Let's take that silly banner off so we can get rid of that. There we go. Other than travel time, are there any disadvantages of the big middleweight type custody suite? No, I think the custody suites work very well in that they become a real centre of excellence, and you've always got more than one sergeant. So there's not one sergeant on the road where mistakes can be made because they don't want to be forever picking up the phone to the sergeant at the other custody suite who's also busy saying, I've got this prisoner, I want to do this. What do you think? Should I do that? Should I do the other? What is there a process for that? It becomes complex. But they're a really good learning and training environment for new custody sergeants coming in, because there's always a team of people around you who know what you're doing, plus a team of detention officers who know their job upside down, inside out, and back to front, and just make things work within the suite. So they do work really well. I don't see any huge disadvantages to them, but travel time is, as you point out, an issue. It takes a long time for people to get there. If you imagine somebody that's arrested in Poynton, if you know the geography of Cheshire, if somebody's arrested in Poynton, which is right up near the border with Greater Manchester Police and Hazel Grove, or even Disley, because Disley is in Cheshire, they're arrested and they put in a van and they've got to drive all the way to Macclesfield, then out of Macclesfield to Chelford, then all the way down Chelford to Holmes Chapel, then through Holmes Chapel and over the M6 and into Middlewich into the custody suite. It takes a long time. Second problem that always comes about with that is the fact that prisoner is dealt with the following morning and sorted out and all the rest of it, and then they're in Middlewich, but they live in Poynton. How are they getting home? We have a certain amount of duty of care to people. Doesn't mean we're a taxi service, but there is a duty of care to people. So you have to look at that and think, how are we going to get them home? Most people make their own way home. They have their own plans. They give somebody a call. They get a taxi, whatever it is that they do. But occasionally there'll be people who need taking because they've got no other means of getting there. And they might have a number of medical conditions that means that our duty of care extends out to sort of saying we need to make sure that they get home. So I never really saw any disadvantages with the custody suites like that, centralised custody suites. And they allowed for a great deal of flexibility of workforce, so that if it was particularly busy if it was quiet at Middlewich, but it was particularly busy at Runcorn, they could draw a sergeant out from Middlewich and say, can you go and help out at Runcorn? Or, somebody's gone sick or whatever. So it generally worked quite well. Ruth, I've had experience of that, Neil. Young people ending up miles away from home before it's known. Yeah, they do. Yeah, they get out and about, and they're often looked upon as being a problem, and I think some of it is a game sometimes to some of them, but they're actually running away from something that they just can't. It doesn't fit and work for them, and everybody looks and says, "Well, why can't they just stay where they are?" And you think, "Well, it's a very complex thing." But there we go. What else? Yeah, Ruth, giving a time was definitely the thing, I think. And I did that a few times, actually. And we're going to talk about somebody in 2000 and let me just scroll through here. 2012, there's another person that I go and spend a little time with sat in a cell. And we'll talk about that one in a few days. Helen, detention officers are worth their weight in gold. They definitely are. And those that have done it for years, who can do it standing on their head and see things and smell things and have the sixth sense that cops have out on the street. They have a sixth sense in custody that goes, they're not quite right. There's something not right there. And detention officers many times over the years when I were in there have highlighted something that has become a big sort of major sort of medical issue or whatever, and they've gone, not happy, really know their stuff. They're really good. Jenny, sometimes, let's have a look. Sometimes I do worry if the police do actually care about who they get to see, or is it just routine? No, I think there's a lot of routine that comes from it. There's a lot of routine and process that we have to go through that makes it that. And I think if you come into custody with your detainee and there's another 20 people looking after other prisoners in there for other things, well, then they're all something else and you're not really bothered unless somebody's kicking up a stink and it's attracting your attention. But I think a lot of the time they do care, but they also care passionately about the victim. And that is sometimes a very difficult blend because you care for the victim and you want to do what's right for the victim, but you've also got to treat this person respectfully and responsibly and with dignity and human rights and all these kind of things. But I think generally, yeah, they do. And I think those cases like Joanne that sort of pop up across your radar, that think, there's somebody that I can go and talk to. I did it with another. I came in. Bobby came in one night with a young lad. He'd been missing, and he'd been locked up for being missing. Not locked up for being missing, but locked up for something else. And he came in. He was probably 15 or 16, really surly. The Bobby was up to here with him, and ended up having a blazing row with him at the desk in front of me. I'm sat there with my computer. I went, got this lad, said, come with me a minute. And I walked him down the corridor and sat him in what we used to call the arch room. It's like an alcohol referral team that used to come in, but it was like a little office. And I just sat him down in there and I said, what's going on? Well, I don't. And I sat there and spoke to him and said, he's angry with you. And he said, he's angry with you because he's got other things that he should be doing, I said, and he's spent ages with you, and he's had to lock you up, and he's found you and took you home, and you've been ballooning off at home and all the rest of it. And we talked about parents, and we talked about sometimes you get on really well with your parents, and sometimes you can't stand them, and you just want to get away. And I said, but ultimately, when they get cross and angry about stuff like that, it's because they care about you. And we talked about how home was his safe place and how he should feel safe there. And he wouldn't talk, and a bit like Joanne, really monosyllabic and what have you. But eventually started to open up and talk. And he spoke, and we sat chatting for about 15 minutes, talking about a few things and getting a few things straight, telling him what he could expect from me and what he could expect while he was at custody. And then we brought him back out. I told the Bobby to knob off and disappear because I didn't want that situation to develop again. I said, I know he's wound you up and you've got angry about it and all this. I said, but just go. And things got sorted. So I think, there are opportunities where you have that gateway to show that you care. And I think there's an awful lot of custody sergeants do that, an awful lot of them. But those moments are rarely seen or documented, which was one of the reasons why I started doing the blog in custody and started showing about the work that I do in custody, because it's a hidden role. Nobody really sees what the custody sergeant does unless you're in there. Anyway, there we go. Do they have crisis teams to help complex people at custody? It depends on the nature of the person's needs. Do we need mental health teams and all the rest of it? And yes, we do. Do we have medical teams on site? Yes, we do. Do we have access to referral schemes and people that we can refer people to? Yes, we do. So there's lots of things in there. There has to be a limit to what we can and can't provide, and what we actually should provide. But yeah, there are support things there that we can get involved with and offer to people as well. So yeah, but there we go. 33 years in 31 days, day 20. I shall fold down my iPad because that's 2009 done and dusted. Thank you for joining me. Thank you for dropping in. Good to see you. Nice to have a few little questions and things towards the end there. Hopefully we'll see you tomorrow on day 21, looking at 2010. Until then, wherever you are, take care, be safe, and I look forward to seeing you tomorrow. Good night.